So let me start. Good afternoon, everyone. It's an absolute delight to have all of you join us. My name is Jim Ginther. I am the interim director for the Center for Medieval Studies, which means I am the grand poobah, the one who's in charge of everything, which means I have all the responsibility and none of the power. But I'm delighted to do this because, as my colleagues, I hope all of us will make it clear that, the reason why we do these things is because we really enjoy seeing students succeed, students developing their research and communication skills, and to become medievalists. And so we're hoping and looking forward to that I'm glad that you're all interested in joining us. So I thought maybe what we should do first is maybe just to go through the list of those who are going to be presenting today, just so we can introduce ourselves. Then we'll kind of do our spiels, and then maybe we also then can, maybe entertain questions, and then also maybe have you guys introduce yourselves too. Even though there is a lot of you, this is wonderful. I am, as I said, I'm the interim director. I am also formerly trained as an historian. I've pretended to be a theologian for most of my career, as that's where I've lived in most departments. And I work on 12th to 14th century theological ideas, particularly in terms of the exegesis of scripture, but also an interest in natural philosophy and how that affects discourse at universities and cathedral schools. So that's me. Renee, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jim. Hi, everyone. It's really wonderful to see so many faces and/or black boxes joining us this afternoon. We appreciate you tuning in from near and far to learn more about our programs here at CMS. I'm the associate director of the center right now, which means that I oversee the master's program and also the admissions process. I am definitely the person to come to, or one of the people to come to with questions. If you have questions about the admissions process as you're embarking, the other person will be Terry Louisi, our graduate administrator, who knows all the ins and outs of the system that you'll be interacting with. It's my pleasure to be here today. In the other part of my job, I'm a professor of Old English language and literature. So I specialize in the literature, language, and culture of the English speaking realms. I would pre-conquest, but really up to about 1200. So that's me. Why don't I pass you off to John Sheckman Marco, who is the chair of our student executive committee.
Hello, thanks Renee, and thanks Jim. So I'm John. I'm the chair of the Student Executive Committee. You'll hear all about what that is in my presentation, so I won't spoil it. But I guess what I usually say after Jim says that he has all the responsibility and no power is to say that I have absolute power, but only over the things that don't matter at all. Um, I am a third year of a PhD student in the program. I'm studying the ecclesiastical and social history of the province of Reims in northeastern France from the late 11th to the early 13th centuries. I will be among the current students, just giving you a little bit of insight into what life is like at the center and what opportunities are available.
Terrific. Stephen, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, hi. I'm Stephen Pelly. I'm one of the editors of the Dictionary of Old English, which is under the Center for Medieval Studies, although we're located in a different building. I'm so in addition to being co-editor of the dictionary, I'm an assistant professor at CMS. In terms of research, I do largely Old English, as you might expect, but also Old Norse and sort of early medieval religious literature more generally. The Dictionary of Old English, one of the things that one of our main points of contact with CMS and sort of day-to-day life is we employ several CMS graduate students as research assistants. We've got 4 right now. I was once one when I was a CMS student about when I was 17 years ago is when I first started at the Dictionary of Old English as a research assistant, and yeah, I have in terms of being an administrator, I'm probably the one with actually the least power. But except over 3 rooms in Robarts Library. But I'm happy to be here anyway, and let me know if you want to talk about Old English and the dictionary.
Terrific. Kara, you were able to join us. It's wonderful. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, hello from the coldest office in the world. It's really nice to see you all and meet you all. I'm the PhD coordinator at the Center for Medieval Studies. I have been for the last 3 years. My job is basically to help support and advise PhD students as they move through the program. And I'll talk more about the structure of the PhD program and things like that when we get into breakout rooms. But just really broadly speaking, I think one of the great pleasures of my job is getting to see scholars sort of develop and find their interests and find their people and watch projects sort of growing and eventually even being completed, which is always amazing. And it's really fun to sort of get to know everyone and yeah, be part of that story. So anyway, looking forward to talking more about the PhD program.
Terrific. And Terry, why don't you tell us who you are and what you do?
Hello, everyone. It's great to have you with us. It's nice to meet you all in these little boxes. I am the graduate administrator here at the Center for Medieval Studies, and I've been here for about 3 years, just maybe a little bit longer than Kara. But I've been at the University of Toronto for close to 20 years. So I've been navigating that large organization and helping students and faculty navigate it for many a year. And I'll be glad to help you with the admissions process, as well as any of the other questions administratively that you may have. But yeah, it's really great that you're here with us, and hope that you apply.
Terrific. And last but not least, Jack McCart, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Jim, and then thanks to Jim, Renee, and all for hosting this. I don't have a formal presentation to deliver today, but I'm here in the event you want the perspective of a current PhD student at the center or want to chat about general daily life as a graduate student at the center. I myself am a PhD candidate here. I focus mainly on death, patronage, and commercial networks, typically in England and usually in the later medieval period. And yeah, so I'm here and on hand to provide any student perspective about things relating to life at the center or the program beyond what my colleagues and mentors here can deliver.
Thank you, Jack. One of the advantages, of course, of doing this, online is that we can gather people from all over the world to come and get the information. The drawback is that you don't get to see where we're actually physically located. The Center for Medieval Studies is in a building called the Lillian Massey Building, which looks like kind of a neoclassical kind of building. We occupy the 3rd floor, and the best part of it is we have a common room called the Great Hall, which really belongs to the students. And it's an important place for us in terms of, allowing the students to foster a community, to be supportive of one another. One of the things I constantly say is that as much as you will learn in the courses that you will take, if you come to the center, you'll probably learn as much in the center talking to your fellow students. And community is something that's very, very important for us. We, want people to be, independent and important scholars, but there's no such thing as a solitary scholar in our view. It's always about community, and particularly because we want to foster an interdisciplinary approach to the research that you will do. And that means you need to learn the skills of listening carefully to one another and people who are historians, literature specialists, theologians, economists, all these individuals who come and are part of our community. And it really is kind of one of the advantage. We have a large number of academics on our masthead. So there's lots of people you can draw from as you work through both your coursework and your dissertation research. So let's start because I know some of you are also are maybe interested in the MA program. So let's start with Renee, and she can take us through that program, and then we'll hand it over to Kara after that.
So just in very brief, the master's program here at CMS is a year-long master's. It runs from September of the year that you're admitted until the following August. The kind of the foundation of that program, and the foundation of all of our programs really, is our Latin program. So as an incoming master's student, you'll be encouraged to sit the level 1 Latin exam just as a diagnostic, just to see where your Latin is at. Students who pass the level 1 Latin on the first go there are not required to do any more Latin as a master's student. But the vast majority of our master's cohort really bonds in the first year Latin course, which lasts for the whole year. It's a year-long course. It meets, I think, 5 days a week. Between regular sessions and tutorials. And its goal is to, just improve your Latin to the best possible standard that you can get it to in the course of that year. And hopefully to prepare you to pass that level 1 exam by the time you leave the program. A pass of that exam is not required to earn your master's. It's just one of the elements of the training elements of the program, and sort of the foundation from which the rest of the program proceed. So everybody will be in that sailing that Latin boat together in that first MA year. In terms of the rest of your coursework, the MA program asks you to take 6 half-year seminars to fill out your coursework. And those seminars can be in any topic that you're interested in. The real advantage of an interdisciplinary program like CMS's is that you are not limited by disciplinary requirements. You can explore any combination of courses and fields and disciplines that appeal to you. And with guidance from your mentors, and as the MA program advisor right now, I would meet with every incoming student to help them set their course schedule. We'll talk about what you're interested in learning, what kinds of skills you want to develop, what sorts of things you've been curious about but maybe haven't had a chance to study in other parts of your post-secondary education. And you'll put together that slate of 6 courses for the year and just begin your process of exploring the Middle Ages there. In addition to those 6 courses, there are 2 sort of optional ways that you can finish out the MA. If you want, you can just do your year-long Latin, you can do your 6 half-year seminars and earn a master's degree and call it a day. If you're interested in pursuing a more kind of in-depth individual research experience, we do have an optional master's thesis. And for students who choose to pursue this option, they will develop a thesis proposal at some point during the fall semester and secure an advisor, a faculty member who agrees to supervise their research for this process. There's a formal proposal that goes forward to the center's executive committee, and if that proposal is approved, then instead of 2 of the half semester courses that you would otherwise take in the winter term, you'll begin working on your independent thesis project. And the idea is that the amount of research and writing that you're doing on this thesis project really is enough to replace 2 half-year seminars. The deadline for the thesis, though, isn't until August 1st. So you would begin working on that project in January, and you would have then basically 6 months to be researching, to be writing, to be working with your supervisor. It's a very intense process. And it really does take over your life, especially in the final stages of writing and getting that approval in. Once you submit the thesis in August, your supervisor and then a second reader that you have secured will read it, will offer you feedback, and will determine whether the thesis passes or not. So if you're interested in an experience like that, the master's thesis is an option. It does mean, though, that you get to take 2 fewer seminar courses during the course of your time in the MA. And that year goes really quickly. You can cram a lot into it, but it's already hard to sort of look at the range of courses that are on offer and choose only 6 from all of the different things you might do. So if you're interested in a more extended research experience, but don't really want to sacrifice those 2 seminar courses that you would have to do to write the thesis, we have in the works a proposal for a major research paper, which would give you the opportunity, again, under the supervision of a faculty advisor, to work more in depth on a paper that you've already begun work on for one of your graduate seminars. You know, a semester only lasts 12 weeks here at Toronto. 12 weeks is not a very long time to develop and then write a seminar paper. They usually end up being, you know, much shorter and much, you know, not as in-depth, not as fully developed as you might want to do with a research question like that. But the time constraints of a semester means there's only so much that you can do. The major research paper would give you the opportunity to take a paper like that and to expand it into a longer piece, again, under the supervision of a faculty advisor, and again, on the timeline that you would have the summer to work on that and would turn it in August. So our proposal for that is currently going through governance here at the university, and we are pretty confident, reasonably confident, that we'll be able to offer that starting next September. So any of you that are interested in the MA program, we're hoping, touch wood, that that major research paper would be an option for you as well. So that's kind of the shape and the scope of the master's. And again, the master's program is really designed to give you exposure to the broadest possible interdisciplinary world of medieval studies, and just a chance to explore, to develop your interests, and to develop your capabilities maybe in areas that you've not previously been able to work in or had any exposure to. So I'll end there just in terms of an overview, but I'm happy to talk more and of course to answer individual questions when we move into our breakout rooms.
Okay, thank you so much, Renee. I don't know if I can possibly talk about the PhD program in so much depth and detail without us being here for hours. But I am going to try to give you a sense of what to expect and some things that you might have in mind if you end up applying, and some of the opportunities that might be involved in the PhD program. So really broadly speaking, our program falls into 3 parts. The first part is coursework. The second part is the special field exam. The third part is dissertating. Mostly going to focus on the first part since that's what happens first. When you arrive here in the first, well, let me back up first, actually. So how do you choose courses? How do you get on your feet? How do you figure all this stuff out when you arrive here? We assign a mentor to new students, not necessarily someone who's going to be your supervisor, but someone in sort of a relevant field who you can talk to. And then I also meet with every student in the program, starting with the newest students every fall. So we're here from the beginning to kind of talk through things like course selection and some of the other possibilities that I'm going to touch on. In the first 2 years, usually in the first 2 years, sometimes it goes into the 3rd year, but in the first couple of years of your PhD program, you want to take 3.0 credits. And what that basically means is 6 semester long courses. Suddenly I'm questioning everything. 6 semester long courses related to your PhD. And those courses are one of the first places where the interdisciplinary focus of our program really comes into focus. We ask students to break their coursework down into a major field and a minor field. So that could be history and literature. It could be like textual studies and philosophy. It's a way of being interdisciplinary, but also kind of having a little bit of a backbone and structure to what you're doing. And again, this is where like I'm here, your mentor's here, other students are here to kind of talk things through and think about the possibilities. We have a wide range of courses here at the center in sort of many different fields. We also list relevant courses in different departments because this is an interdisciplinary, you are CMS students are interdisciplinary students, and so it's important to kind of be thinking across departments and also taking advantage of everything at the center. Other things that you might be considering in those first few years would be options like taking on a collaborative specialization. And collaborative specialization is an opportunity to get even more interdisciplinary. And these are these sort of, there are these specialized programs that exist outside of departments where you can come together with other students from across the university who are working on a shared interest. So for example, there is a collaborative specialization in ancient and medieval philosophy. Students from CMS, classics, philosophy, probably other departments too, all coming together to work on this topic. And every collaborative specialization is a little bit different in terms of how it works and the requirements, but often there will be sort of a pro seminar where you come together with these students in other departments and work through the kind of field that you have this shared interest in. Sometimes there will be requirements for like a practicum. They're all a little bit different, but you can find a list of the ones we participate in. I'm going to share it with you. So you can see a list of the ones that we're currently participating in, which include, as I say, ancient and medieval philosophy, book history, and print culture. That tends to be a very popular one with our students. Food studies, that one is quite new. Jewish studies, sexual diversity studies, women and gender studies. And the other thing I'll say is that we're adding a new one, which governance willing will be up and running by next fall in it is in pre-modern global approaches to the study of literature and history, which, of all fields is one that makes a ton of sense to be working across departments, and to be in conversation with students in religion, in Spanish and Portuguese and Italian and all kinds of different departments. So we're putting that one into place as well, pre-modern global studies. So that is one option that you might be thinking about in those early years of your PhD program. You might also be thinking about the option of a JEP, which is something that allows you to earn a degree from multiple universities. It's a complicated thing, so if you're interested in this, tell me as soon as possible so I can get the ball rolling. But we are able to collaborate with other institutions so that you might spend a year or two there, as well as doing everything, all of your requirements here, and ultimately earn a degree from both institutions. It's essentially one degree from two institutions. It's administratively complicated, but basically it means you get experience and mentorship from two institutions. And that can be a really cool opportunity. So these are some things you might be thinking about early on as you're considering the shape your PhD might take. And I should say, we've recently had students doing PhDs at universities in Iceland, in France, in Switzerland, and other places too that I'm probably forgetting. But it's a cool chance to get some international experience. Another thing that happens during those early years of coursework is we start doing our best to support your professional development. That mostly takes the form of this course, MST 1003. I sort of think of it, I facilitated as PhD coordinator, and I think of it kind of as a double course. Half the sessions have to do with learning how to be a PhD student, learning how to, for example, manage your time when you're writing a dissertation, that sort of thing. And then half of the sessions have to do with learning what to do after you're a PhD student. So we help with like learning how to write materials to apply for academic jobs. And we also have sessions to help in thinking about possible non-academic jobs after the PhD. And it's a really cool collaborative course because we bring in a lot of alumni and some current students and other friends to sort of talk about all of these things. Lots of faculty will come in. Our most recent discussion was about how to write your first journal articles and get your first publications out there, which I always find to be a really exciting topic to talk about. So we do that kind of thing. That goes on, like I say, coursework, first 2 years, maybe into the third year. Those first 3 years are also about passing language exams. And I'm sure this will come up some more, but for the PhD, you need to have that Latin 1 passed in order to start. And then by year 3, you need to have passed Latin 2. And folks very often take multiple shots at Latin 2. Very normal to take a few tries at that, to maybe audit the course a couple times in order to shore up your Latin. It's a tough exam, but it's, it really earns the respect of every medievalist that I know. So that's part of what you'll be doing those first 3 years. And then also passing the modern language exams in French and German with the option, this is another thing to think about this first few years, but you do have the option to potentially swap in a different modern language that might be more relevant for you. For example, recently we've had someone swap Italian in for German because they're working on literature written in Italy. So that's a lot of what's going on in those first 3 years. And then those first 3 years are capped off with our field exam. I've been talking for a while, and if I start to get into the weeds with the field exam, we'll be here forever. So that's something I'd be happy to talk about more in the breakout room. I will say it is designed to get you, it's designed to do two things. One, to help you think about teaching, because that is an important part of your intellectual formation. And two, to help you hit the ground running with your dissertation, and to ideally have either a really clear framework of where you're going to go, or even to maybe have a little bit of it already written. And like I said, I can talk more in the breakout room about how that works. But once you get through that, then you're on to your dissertation. You're not alone. You've got your committee by that point. I should have mentioned you form your committee in year 2 with my help and your mentor's help. You've got your committee to support you. I continue to meet with students every year, and we have our whole community, our regular convivia. You're not alone while you're dissertating. And one of my goals is to hopefully make sure that folks don't feel that way. So we can talk a lot more about that as well. But at this point, I've been talking for a while, so I'll stop for now.
Thanks, Kara. Yeah, the PhD program is a little bit complicated, but we are in terms of our approaches that we're coaches. We're all always on the sidelines trying to to provide support for you. We do not want you to feel like you're out there on your own at all. And it can be daunting. One of the things I just wanted to talk briefly about before we do kind of break into our breakout rooms, and that is the Latin program. Both Renee and Kara had mentioned that it's kind of at the heart of what we do here. It's kind of what, in some ways Toronto is known for. And I mean, it started out initially, for those, when the center started, it was started in relation to the Pontifical Institute of Medieval Studies, which is one of our collaborating partners in Toronto. And it was mainly philosophers and theologians who were being trained, and so trained to be also to edit texts. And as we expanded into, to provide space for other disciplines, we still felt that the center still felt that it was vital that everyone have kind of a high capability in Latin, so that you can work with the sources that are related to your research in other areas that may not be so Latin focused. And so what we are doing in the Latin program is giving you the capability and the skill set to read a variety of types of texts, to understand kind of the changes that have happened to the Latin language throughout the Middle Ages, which also can help in kind of dating texts, understanding how it has implications for vernacular texts. So these are really important things that we want you to do. So this is why when any Latin course you're in, you're meeting 5 days a week, 4 days with the instructor, and 1 day with a TA. These are classes that are usually between 5, 10, sometimes 15 at the 1,000 level for the level 1, depending on how big our MA cohort is in that year. But we assign at least 3 teaching assistants to each of those courses. So you get a lot of individual tuition and support here, so that we don't, again, feel like you're on your own. And the diagnostic test that we use for incoming MA students helps us to kind of gear what the instructor is going to do in terms of what they'll teach you in the class. And our primary kind of form of instruction really is to take you through various texts and get you exposed to how you kind of read these texts, what kind of vocabulary you need to acquire. The test itself, you can look at the exams. They're all online. As soon as we have one, we put it on, and it's been graded, then that goes online and you can see what we do here and what our expectations are. You'll note that probably the most scary part that students find is that it's done without dictionary. There's an expectation that you should be able to have, a good vocabulary and be able to read these texts. It doesn't mean we're looking for perfection, and sometimes we encourage students, particularly when they're taking the first or second stab at the level exam they're writing, at least to indicate what they think the grammatical or syntax structure of the word. They don't know what it means, at least, well, then we know it's in the ablative, or it's a participle, so it helps us again to diagnose how we can then help strengthen the skill sets you need to have. I find, and I'll be honest, I'm a graduate of the center. I did both my MA and PhD here. And I struggled with languages right from the very beginning. And what turned it for me was having to know what a text said in order to figure out what I needed to do for a seminar paper. And that moved it from, a practical kind of exercise to something that was really, really important to me. And that's the motivation we're hoping that, all of you will eventually say, okay, I need to know what this text means. How do I get that? How do I develop those skills? We also provide support for modern languages. We always have a TA for French and German who can meet with you and help you get ready for those exams. So we really want to make sure you're supported for the linguistic tasks that you have to accomplish in order to make your way through the program. We also do once a year, we do what we call a Latin town hall, in which we have students come and kind of yell at us about, things that they don't understand and what we're doing and why we're doing that, so that we're able to explain kind of what our pedagogical goals are here and be able to kind of figure out how we can kind of be better at communicating about it and also just being better teachers of Latin. I am thrilled with the level and quality of Latin instruction here. So my colleagues who teach in that program are just phenomenal because they're so dedicated and they love the language so deeply. And that just kind of comes out of them naturally. But they're also very pragmatic and practical about this. They're not trying to turn you all into Latinists. They understand that this is kind of something you need to advance your own individual research, and they want to be supportive of that. So that's kind of as a core program. Connected to that, of course, is once you pass the level 1, you can then take courses in Latin paleography or codicology and textual criticism. And if you are interested in editing texts as part of your research, and that can be a lot of fun because then you get to deal with something that nobody's ever really read before or have read incorrectly, and you get to correct the entire world because you have the proper addition done. So there are lots of opportunities. I have one of our colleagues, Dr. Sebeski, who actually teaches vernacular paleography in Middle English, also Professor Will Robbins does something similar as well. So there are opportunities to look at vernacular paleography as well. Jack can tell you about a diplomatics course, which is learning how to read charters and those kind of diplomatic papal encyclicals and things like that have a specific way in which you kind of look at that and how you kind of actually approach them as editing projects as well. So there are really opportunities to develop very strong skills that allows then you to be very creative in your research as a PhD student and even MA student. We often have MA students who come in and pass the level 1 exam, and then they can take some of these courses as well and really kind of strengthen their game.
So John, do you want to talk a little bit about student life?
Sure, yeah. This is a short little presentation. So the way that I think about it, the way I've decided to organize this is to just talk briefly about sort of the informal and then the formal sides of student life. So on the informal side, I mean, I have all the qualifications of someone who's been here for 3.5 academic years, so decently qualified, but less qualified than Jack, for example. I will say, in my experience, I know Jim touched on this already, CMS is really set aside by the fact that it has a community of medievalists. I have friends, I'm a historian, I have friends who are doing PhDs in history programs. And in general, there's always sort of an element of marginalization in such departments for pre-modernists of all stripes. If you do get a medievalist, very often you'll just get multiple 20th century people, I think that there is something extremely special, not only in the interdisciplinarity of CMS's faculty and students, but also in the fact that it is a community of medievalists. Both, I think that's makes for an extremely nurturing community, not only from an academic standpoint, but also just from a personal standpoint, you might say. I'm right across the hall from the Great Hall, the main social space, and I've been listening to literal gales of laughter wafting over. Maybe you'll even be able to hear them too if you strain your ears. So it is an extremely, I would say just again speaking purely from my own experience, and it is an extremely supportive and extremely nurturing and community, and one that I'm very happy to be a part of. That being said, that's the informal side of things. So there is sort of mirroring the faculty executive, the structure of the department. There's a bit of a student executive, which I am a member of with two other people on this as a committee. I won't get into too much about how that's chosen because that's more something that becomes relevant if you come here and do a PhD in your upper years. But there are basically we, as the SEC, oversee a group of other student committees, truly, which are committees for students and composed entirely of students, as well as choosing or really soliciting volunteers for students to sit on committees, which are departmental committees. So they include faculty and staff as well. Just to give an idea of what these committees sort of do, what their briefs are. I'll just go through this fairly quickly. Among the student committees, we have a welcoming committee. We have a committee set up specifically to host events to welcome incoming MAs and first-year PhDs socially, but also logistically. I know yeah, it's especially many people come to this program moving, sometimes from quite far away. I moved from the United States, so I came here not really knowing anybody. So it was very nice to have sort of a group of people with a packet of information ready to go, not only about the department, but about like sort of nice restaurants around campus, just all sorts of things related to student life. Every year that I've been involved or seen this happen, they're always on top of it. So that's a very useful resource to have. We also have a committee called Work in Medieval Studies, which is specifically to put on events which are basically fora to practice conference presentations, to present research in progress, to get feedback from your peers in sort of a low intensity situation. As well as a couple of other committees. We have a health and wellness committee because academic life can get very stressful. That's no secret. And we have basically a committee to put on events to give students information about strategies to deal with those potential challenges, as well as two committees, a social committee just to put on general social events, and a department movie club, which has a special place in my heart because it is because I was on it for a couple of years, and it's just a lot of fun. And these are events, so there are a lot of events going on all the time. I'd say I think there are two coming up even in this week alone, and people do actually come to them. So that's also a sort of vector for community to be built and to sort of cohere. There's a very active sort of like there are always social events going on. There's also student representation on, like I said, departmental committees. So this is important because obviously one important part of an academic career is service, which very often does boil down to just sitting on committees. And these are, as you can see, these are committees which play a very important role in the functioning of the department. We have language committees which assess their job is to set and to assess the language exams, so the Latin and then the French and German, and then any other exams for if people switch those out. Students, I believe, don't vote on they don't have play a part in the marking process, but they're there as observers just to give students a chance not to participate, but at least to be involved, to observe on that process as it unfurls. And then we have 3 other committees, academic programming, publications, and conferences and lectures, which collectively just oversee a lot of other facets of academic activities in the department, which also have student representation, as well as graduate student representatives in the Graduate Student Union and in the Canadian Union of Public Employees, CUPE, which is the union for teaching assistants. So when you are teaching, you will be a member of that union. All of these student representative roles and the roles on the departmental committees, usually those are filled by PhDs, but the student life committees are open to PhDs and MAs altogether. We encourage people to get involved. There's a lot of positions available, so often it's kind of an all hands on deck. Everybody is doing something, especially at least in the first couple of years of your PhD, or as an MA, as the case may be. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any more questions about any aspect of this in the breakout room, but I just wanted to give a sort of brief taste of what the student life here is like. And yeah.
Okay, so a lot of what I'm going to talk about is available on our website for you to take a look at. Yeah, it's available at this link, and I believe we're going to have email addresses so I can send this presentation around afterwards. So in terms of the minimum admission requirements, some of this has already been discussed. MA applicants, they're going to need to have a mid-B, a relevant bachelor's degree with at least a mid-B in their final year. Applicants are required to have completed at least 1 full year of Latin, of an introductory Latin course with a mark of B+ or equivalent. PhD applicants need a relevant master's degree with at least a B+ average, or equivalent research competence. And PhD applicants are admitted on condition passing the Level 1 Latin exam. So you're encouraged to take that exam in April. And it's offered again in September. So if you're unsuccessful in April, then you're also encouraged to take our summer Latin program, the Level 1 Latin course, in preparation for the September exam. And both opportunities are free of charge. The application is the self-administered application. Admissions is open now and will close on January 7th. Again, information about all of this is on our website. It's a self-administered application. Here is the link that you'll need to access in order to apply. You want to create a personal profile to begin the application, and it usually takes about 30 to 60 minutes to do so. And then you're going to include personal information and your academic history. You're going to be answering several questions regarding your preparation and study of Latin and other languages, and you'll be asked to share career plans in lieu of a personal statement. And when you're applying to the PhD, you're also going to be answering questions about your research interests. You'll be able to pause and revisit the application until you pay the fee, after which you're not going to be able to make changes to the application. But you will be able to, after you pay the fee, to submit your statement of intent and your sample of research. And so some people will be, going through the application and wondering, well, why am I going to be able to submit that? And it happens after you pay the fee. In terms of your referees, applicants are required to enter information for 2 academic referees, and you're going to want to contact them ahead of time because we prefer to have email addresses that are from the university that they're with, and so then you're also going to want to inform them because once you submit that to the application portal, the system will automatically contact the referees. So you're going to want to let them know ahead of time this is going to happen. And also yeah, you're just going to want to be careful to submit the correct information to the system so that we're contacting the referees correctly and appropriately. And if you need to change your referees, you just need to contact me at the email grad@adm.medieval@utoronto, and then we can work with you to assist you with that piece. As I mentioned earlier, unofficial transcripts, writing samples, and such, they can be submitted to the portal after submitting your application and fee. You're going to only want to submit one writing sample, between 10 and 20 pages. And examples include published work as well as excerpts from your thesis. And then you also upload your academic CV. CMS accepts unofficial transcripts at the time of application. If you don't have an official transcript at the time of application. These can be scans of paper transcripts, or they can be PDF of your academic record. But official transcripts are going to be required after an offer is made. And with the scanned copies of your transcripts, please do include a legend to help us understand, because every university has a different system sometimes. So that's helpful in us being able to evaluate your transcript. And to view the status of your application, including outstanding requirements, you just need, again, log into the applicant status portal. English language requirements for students who have attended universities where English is not the language of instruction. You will need to complete an English language facility test. This is often for these are students from outside the university, and this is often the TOEFL. And below here you'll see the minimum score for the written piece and for the test. And so that'll be a condition of admission. And this may not be something that you have at the point of application, but you would need it. You would need it in terms of if you receive a conditional offer, and that would need to be submitted before you begin in the fall. And I also just wanted to mention briefly about the Center for International Experience. It's a really amazing resource for international students. We have the link here. And it offers a wide range of programs that help support international students in their transition to this country, to Canada, and to being a university student. And what's really important is that they offer a team of licensed international student immigration advisors to help students who are trying to secure work permits, visas, study permits. This is something that they are trained to do and licensed to do. So they're the resource that we will point you to in a lot of cases to help you with that part of transitioning to Canada and to the University of Toronto. So I just want to welcome you and to thank you for coming to this. And here's my email. And if you have questions about this, please please feel free to reach out. Thank you.
There is language support for Arabic and Near and Middle Eastern studies. So both as a research language and also as just a language of scholarship. So yeah, I mean, we've had students, in the past have taken Arabic. It can't substitute. We still want you to have the capability in Latin and our two modern languages. But there is an opportunity to kind of extend yourself and take on a second primary source language. And you could do courses. We have to be clear though that if you did take a course to learn Arabic, it wouldn't count towards your program requirements. It would count as an additional course. So just as long as you're aware of that. But yes, you could certainly pursue that.
Yeah, I was wondering if there's any sort of more methodological work groups or reading groups or anything like that. Particularly if there's digital humanities stuff people in the department are working on. I know that a lot of times it's been hit or miss, number of schools, whether they have that or not.
Yeah, there is. So there's two things. One is that there is a Center for Critical Digital Humanities that has just started here. I think it's an institute actually. It's pretty expansive, and it sometimes tends to be a little more theoretical than in terms of developing practical applications, which is my experience in DH. But we also have, so some of the research I'm doing right now has a DH component to it. And then one of our colleagues, Dr. Alexandra Valentiano, who works in Middle English, but she's also trained as a computer scientist. And so she actually integrates digital human. She runs actually the digital humanities minor at the undergraduate level. And so she's about, data analysis as a pedagogical tool, as well as a research tool. So there are plenty of people to have conversations with here about this. And our computer science department is very interested in big data issues. And they occasionally are a little bemused when the humanists come to ask them questions. But our response is we're giving you meaning to all your numbers. So, so does that help?
Yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah, I'm sorry if this is an obvious question for everyone else, but in Europe, PhD works a lot differently. Like we don't have this coursework and everything. So my question is, how long is the dissertation in the end? Because it seems it's a shorter time to write than in Europe. So is it also a monography in the end, or how long is that going to be?
I mean, it varies because we are an interdisciplinary center. People will ask about minimums and maximums, and it varies quite a bit because of the different disciplines represented. But, Jim, please correct me and chime in, but we're generally thinking about, say, a 4 or 5 chapter dissertation, something that would be the basis to then eventually go back and revise, potentially to create a monograph or a series of articles. I think we do have an upper limit of 90,000 words.
Yeah.
That's the very top, just to give you a slight sense of scale. But I suppose that North American dissertation model is still kind of coming off the idea that it is a stepping stone towards an academic monograph.
Okay. So then after that, you still have to develop the book and publish the book?
Well, not as a PhD student, but in an academic job, in many departments, that would be the next step to develop the book and publish the book.
Okay, so it's not required because in Europe, you can only have the PhD if you publish the book.
Oh, no, gosh, no, absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely not. Nope. Just the dissertation.
Okay, and do you have, sorry, I have another question. Do you have a lot of international students? International not being American or Canadian?
Yeah, we do. Yeah. I would say we have, let's see, our current cohort of, what is it? The current cohort is 4, of which 1 is a European student. And yeah, I would say that most years, maybe every other year, and we have a student coming from outside of North America. What do you think, Jim?
Yeah, I mean, probably, I mean, we in our application process, we have to distinguish between domestic Canadian, and then visa student, and that's both American and international, people outside the continent. So yeah, probably the bulk of our international visa students are American, but we have from time to time, I think right now, I think we've got about 4 out of the cohort, of a quarter of about 26 that are from Europe. So what we're struggling with now as every university in Canada is that they've reduced the quota of how many international students can come to Canadian universities. And so we have to figure out. Now, luckily, the University of Toronto is in a good position because it has such a good reputation that we've been able to get all the requirements filled for our international students. But it sometimes takes a little bit longer these days to get. And so, and I think sometimes, because I used to do admissions before Renee did, and trying to explain, what the advantage would be for a European student to come here in some ways and then return. It takes a while to figure out, because you're right that the system is so different. But we've, I think Toronto's got a very good reputation in Europe. So in terms of the final outcome, it's a well-recognized degree. So
we also have quite a few core faculty members coming from the European system, which I've always been, as someone who tries to help with professional development, I've always been really grateful for them to help give the European angle to talk about, for example, applying for European postdocs and translating between the systems.
Okay, thank you so much.
I know that you guys spoke a bit about teaching assistants, particularly for language, but I was wondering what those opportunities look like, both for languages and if there's other TA positions. Is it integrated into the program?
So, yeah, I mean, one of the things we've been able to do for the last 4 years is to be able to assign a TA-ship to every incoming student. And then you become part of a union, which means you have 6 years of entitlement based on the kind of number of hours that you get in your first and second TA-ship. They range because there is an undergraduate program in medieval studies, but it's not part of our unit. It's run by a federated college in Toronto. And so there's probably, we assign probably about 10, 11 students there in various courses ranging from history to literature to religion to law kind of things. And often those are grading TA-ships, so they get large enough that they can run tutorials. We have 2 very large courses taught by Dr. Valenciano, that large enough that we assign 4 or 5 TAs who run tutorials for that as well. And then each year we negotiate with the Center for Renaissance and Reformation Studies for a number of TA-ships. Anybody coming in who's going to do medieval philosophy will get a TA-ship in philosophy. Where we cannot break into, offering TA-ships is in the departments of history and English, because they barely have enough TA-ships to offer their own students. So that's one of the areas. But in terms of topics, there are opportunities, for you to have TA-ships in your field if you're interested in literature or if you're interested in history. So, for example, I teach a survey course of the later medieval tradition. And so usually, it's an historian TA who ends up working with me. But then there's also TA-ships and course and structure opportunities that we don't manage, but become available. We have 2 other campuses besides the St. George campus. And so sometimes they are looking for teaching assistants. Sometimes they're looking for course instructors. And you are able to kind of apply to those and work there as well. So there are teaching opportunities. We think it's really important that you get some teaching experience as part of the program, as part of your professional development. And ultimately, when it comes to jobbing, if you're going to be, applying for academic jobs, you can be a brilliant scholar, but unless you know how to work in the classroom, that's really what's going to get you the job. So I think it's really important. Where we struggle is offering enough course instructorships where you're running the course on your own for all our PhD students. Those I have yet to kind of crack that nut in terms of the number of resources available for that.
I was just going to add a tiny thing, which is teaching is part of our field exam for PhD students, or rather thinking about teaching is part of our field exam for PhD students. Part of that field exam involves writing about your research, and I'd be happy to talk more about that. But we also have students produce a syllabus for a course that they would like to teach in their field as part of the exam process. And it's just a small thing, but ideally ties into this larger work of learning to talk about your teaching, learning how to design a course. And I think importantly, when someone is getting a lot of TA-ships and maybe a CI-ship is harder to come by, I think it becomes really important to learn how to talk about your teaching and think really carefully and deliberately about what you're doing, even as a TA, so that you can communicate who you are as a teacher. Even if you haven't had quite as many CI-ships as would be ideal, I think it's really important to learn to communicate who you are as a teacher. So that's something that I try to do in MST 1003, and it factors into the field exam a little bit as well.
So I am more than content and comfortable with cobbling together committees. That's kind of what I've done for my master's, which has led me to kind of that like world history angle. But I'm just curious, you guys have a really robust medieval department. There's so many medievalists. I am curious if there's any who do more Byzantine studies. I don't necessarily need a specific Byzantinist or anything. but just like somebody with familiarity of kind of that earlier or high medieval period.
Closest we probably have right now, Byzantine studies is somewhere that is undeveloped here. And the problem with doing Byzantine studies is that you just don't need just one scholar. You need at least two faculty positions to support it properly, and that has been a bit of a challenge for us. I mean, the closest I think we have is probably Professor Nick Everett, who works on early medieval Italy. So obviously, the relationship between Italy and Byzantium is an important part of that facet. So he's well schooled there. But that's probably about it at this point. It is a weak area of us. I'll be absolutely honest. I would love to have an equivalent of a Dunbarton notes next to us, but that, because we can't have everything.
We do have a student working on Byzantine studies, and she is doing it partly via a JEP in France. She has Dorothea Colman as a supervisor, who is not a Byzantinist. She works in later French. But that's one way that she's been able to do it.
Can't believe nobody's asked about money.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about money.
All right, Anna, you're on you go to the front of the class.
Yeah. Again, as I'm not familiar with this whole scholarship system, I mean, you can tell me how much I would get. I still don't know if that's enough. So can you please elaborate on this funding thing?
Sure. Right now, we guarantee funding for 5 years at $40,000 a year. Tuition only costs $9,000 here at the current rate, which means that there's a stipend of $31,000, which is, not great, but it's enough to survive in Toronto and be able to afford housing and to eat more than just ramen on a daily basis. So it's been a significant improvement over last about 2 years ago, in which we were only giving about $21,000 in terms of an annual stipend. Now that is funded partially by kind of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, but also it's funded by the fact that we're going to assign you an RA-ship, a research assistantship, to work with a faculty member or work at one of our collaborating partners. And so that funding, that income will go towards your scholarship program. And then if we do teaching assistantships to a certain amount, will go to funding towards your annual funding. And then there are opportunities to actually have more. So some of our students, you end up with an extra TA-ship, or end up with a course instructorship, or end up with another research assistantship outside of what was used to construct their funding thing. And so they do have additional funds. One of the nice things that University of Toronto did about 10 years ago was that they stopped differentiating between international and domestic students in terms of tuition costs for humanities. So normally a annual tuition fee for an international student at the graduate level is about $30,000. For humanities, they said, no, we want to attract the best students. We want to make it affordable for them. So they said, you'll pay the same as a domestic student, which right now for tuition and fees is about $9,000. It'll probably go up a little bit. And we have to figure out how we adjust accordingly. But we think it's, that the $31,000 as a stipend is a living wage. You can survive here in Toronto. It's an expensive city. I don't know if it's more expensive than, say, the cities in Switzerland. I honestly don't know about that. But the cost of living is high here. But we think students tend to be able to survive and live fairly comfortably. So.
This is kind of more of like an application question, so I hope it's okay to ask it here. But I noticed in the presentation earlier, it said one of the requirements was to already have a master's. So I'm like, would this mean that since I'm currently doing a master's and I won't graduate from that until summer 2026? So would you say that actually I kind of can't apply now and should wait to apply until I have already
You can apply, yeah. You need a master's to start.
Okay, so
yeah, but you don't need a master's to apply. Is
Oh.
is that a fair way to put it, Jim? Like,
Yeah, we would give you a conditional offer of entry, and then before you could start the program in September, you'd have to demonstrate that you had completed your master's.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a
I
very common
misunderstood.
practice throughout North America. So
So this is probably a no dog question. Obviously, you should, but I was wondering because you mentioned a lot of emphasis on teaching and that sort of thing. Would you recommend maybe putting maybe a bit more emphasis if you've had relevant teaching experience, say at the uh, high school level, teaching AP courses, this sort of thing? Experience experimenting with pedagogical techniques, the so on and so forth. Is that something worth mentioning, or maybe not? Maybe make room for other things.
Um, that's an interesting question. I mean, one of the questions on the application has to do with your thinking about your career. And if pedagogy is an important part of your sort of career goals, secondary or post-secondary pedagogy, then I think that might be a place to talk about how you've had this experience and how you are interested in continuing to work on your teaching and going on to develop your teaching. I would say, in terms of the questions that focus on research, make sure to focus on your research because that's sort of going to be front and center in a PhD application. That's the sort of there's a phrase I'm looking for, like that's where the money that's where the substance is. But I think that's interesting experience, and if it's relevant to that career section, that could be an interesting way to bring it in.
Just earlier when you mentioned if anyone has questions about like choosing the piece of writing, that made me, I don't necessarily have like a formulated question, but now that you say that, I would love to hear more about that. If anything to
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always one of the hardest parts of putting together an application, and everyone is weighing pros and cons and coming to a slightly different conclusion. Like, for example, your best paper versus the paper that's most relevant to what you want to work on. These things could be slightly different. Um, and I mean, Jim, we should definitely both speak to this. In my own opinion, one of the first things that really matters to me when I look at a writing sample is just to make sure that this person can do the work. Can they use secondary and primary scholarship appropriately? Can they work with the medieval source appropriately? Have they done, maybe not researched every single thing out there on a topic, but are they adequately researching and supporting their arguments? Are they organizing their argument? And is the writing good? Is the writing strong? Because writing is one of the hardest things to teach and one of the most important aspects of our profession for all of us. So I suppose number one thing is just to make sure that it's a paper that shows that you are good at the business of writing and medievalist scholarship. I think that at the PhD level, that scholarship should be medievalist. MA students might sometimes send a non-medieval essay just to show that they're able to do the work. But I think that at the PhD level, it is important to see that, you're a medievalist, you're able to work with medieval sources, you're able to think about the medieval period. Yeah, I have some other thoughts too. I want to kind of keep chewing it over. Jim, what do you think? What have I
I think
missed?
you're absolutely right. I think one of the things, don't worry about trying to submit something that's about original research. Okay. If you have something like that, terrific. But really, I mean, what Kara is saying is really important is, can you write, can you marshal evidence to make an argument, and understand how to structure a paper to effectively make an argument. That's really kind of what we're looking for. So yeah, I mean, I'm a pedant, so I always look at footnotes and see whether they're properly formatted and stuff. But I've never said, "Oh, they didn't use Chicago style correctly. I'm never going to admit them." Nothing like that. It's really what the thrust of the paper, that it's good writing and it makes an argument.
Oh, and one thing that can be challenging, some of you might feel that your best work is contained within a long, like MA thesis.
Yeah.
And that can be difficult because what do you then submit as the sample? Definitely don't submit the whole thesis. Don't do that.
Please don't.
Um, often people will excerpt a piece of the thesis, and that can work well. But if you choose to do that, it really needs to be in an accessible structure with a clear introduction that sets things up so that the committee can follow it well. If you're just dropping the admissions committee into the middle of a dense chapter about difficult material and they have nothing to grab onto, they're just going to be lost. It doesn't matter how brilliant your arguments or your readings or your evidence is. When you're reading a lot of these applications quickly, it's really important to be able to say, oh, okay, I understand what this essay is about. I can see the person delivering on what they've said they're going to do. Great. So if you excerpt a piece of a thesis, ideally it would be the beginning of a chapter, so you've got that introductory material there. And sometimes people will also put a little bit of framing, like this comes from my, this is the third chapter of my thesis about X, Y, and Z. And you can do that, but again, I don't personally think, and Jim, you might disagree, but I don't personally think that 5 sentences of framing does the work of a true introduction to bring us into tense material.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, yeah, because for us, good writing means that the reader can follow what you're trying to say. Not only is the grammar correct and the use of language is appropriate, but it's being good at communicating your ideas. So you're right. So framing things in some ways is a very, very important aspect of writing at the doctoral level.
But it's a good question. I mean, I think it's always it continues to be an interesting thing to then fret and worry about when it comes time to do job applications. So that continues.
I have a follow-up question on that. Is it also possible to submit the introduction of the thesis and then a later chapter? Because in my part, I'd have to translate it from German anyway.
Oh my goodness, that is it's a lot of work. It's a good question. So whatever you submit, I don't know off the top of my head what our page limit is, but whatever you submit, you want it to be within our page limit. So I'm not sure if an introduction in a chapter sounds like a lot, but if it fits within our page limit, I guess it would be all right. An introduction can work, like the introduction to a thesis.
Yeah.
There is sometimes if your introduction is super, super broad and you're not dealing with primary sources, maybe it doesn't show everything you can do. But it certainly can work. And I guess it's up to you to determine whether you feel the introduction shows you at your best or whether one of your chapters can stand on its own and show both your big thinking and your close dealing with sources and evidence. Yeah, sorry, it's a bit of a vague answer, but it kind of depends.
Yeah, no, I get what you mean.
Yeah, we are permitted to receive applications in English and French because those are the 2 national languages. Unfortunately, German is not one of them, so I'm sorry that. And we do have colleagues who are fluent in German and would have no problem. Other colleagues would find this a bit of a challenge, but still be able to do it. But yeah, we have to limit it to English and French as our language of application.
If we're being really pedantic about footnotes, is there one side of the Chicago 17 versus 18 debate that you fall on?
Yeah, it is a problem. I mean, you'll note that we do not have a central style sheet for the center because there's so many disciplines at work here. I'm trained as an historian, so the Chicago Manual is kind of like second nature to me. But and I just finished supervising a thesis that was really more literary, with some Latin textual criticism attached to it, and the student insisted quite rightly to do inline citation. So and it makes perfect sense in relation to the discipline that she eventually wants to get into. So so we allow some flexibility. So I say we're not going to criticize or reject or admit a dissertation based on any kind of manual of style. But I love the question, Sarah. I do.
Always good to be consistent. That's my only thought.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the writing sample. I mean, are there thoughts about like writing about your research or questions about how you write about your research for the sort of question section of the application or choosing reference letters or anything like that?
Actually, I had a question about how advisors are chosen, like within the program. Is it more of the, you name people when you apply that you'd like to work with? Or is it one of the programs where you come in and then you usually choose someone after the first year?
Well, you choose someone after the first year. I'll talk about that in a sec. When you are at the process of application, it's definitely a good idea to look and see who might I be able to work with. It's just good to have that in mind. It's good for you because you want there to be possibilities for someone who you could work with. It lets us know that you are thinking about the program seriously, that you've done some research. So it's a great thing to think about at the application stage. And it also means that you can go in and at least try to do something that I always recommend, which is try to take a course with folks who you want to work with. I think that's the best way to get to know a potential supervisor. Similarly, for me, it's always been the best way to get to know a potential supervisee. You get to see I think it's really, really useful, for example, to have someone give feedback on your work before you decide to work with them as a supervisor, because that's such a key aspect of that relationship. So great to have people in mind, but it's not assigned until so you work with me, you work with your mentor, you ideally are taking courses with people who you might want to work with. And then in your second year, you submit a form with your thesis committee that you've decided you want to put together. And that would be probably a supervisor and two committee members. Sometimes there's other structures, but that's the most common one. And yeah, but it's open until then, and it's something that I really try to help with, and really important to be trying to get to know people from day one, especially in coursework if possible. And another thing you might be able to do, obviously this doesn't always work out, but if your person who you want to work with is not teaching for some reason, you might be able to organize a directed reading with them. So like an independent study course, and that counts towards your course requirements. And again, it can be a good way to get to know the person.
Yeah, I was just curious about your advice on how to like the best steps, if you will, in preparing for the dissertation within the first 2 or 3 years.
People come in with very different levels of specificity in terms of whether they know exactly what they want to write about, whether they have a broad area of interest. And some people know I want to write my dissertation about this, and some people are less sure. And the great thing is that both succeed. I've seen both succeed, and both can absolutely be a path to success. So different people's paths to laying the groundwork to a strong dissertation may look a little bit different, but more than one way can succeed. And I just think that's important to note, because I know in particular, sometimes students who aren't quite so sure what they want to write about can get like a lot of anxiety, but there's more than one way to make it work. And then I think, let's see, one thing you're going to think about is coursework. And there, I think you're really going to be trying to strike a balance between what are the skills that I need to accomplish my dissertation? So for example, are you wanting to take a paleography or textual criticism course? Is there specific background that you need? So really kind of targeting the courses that'll give you the skills you need. But then there's a lot of priorities, because you also want to target the courses that'll help you get to know your committee. That is super important for succeeding in your dissertation, having a good relationship with your supervisor in particular, and ideally your other committee members. And then this is my personal opinion. Maybe not everyone would agree, but I do think in those first couple of years, it's worth not locking yourself in too rigid of a framework. It's worth spending at least a little bit of your coursework exploring or pushing yourself, even if it doesn't look like it's leading on the exact trajectory to exactly where you want to go. One thing that you want to avoid is too much boredom and burnout with your subject, and pushing yourself, trying something different, getting a new perspective. I think that's important too. And those first couple of years before you're locked in, it's doubly important, because you don't want to kind of precipitously embark on a dissertation that you planned when you were in your master's. You want to let it grow and mature. So there's a lot of priorities to think about with your coursework and to balance. Like I said, I think finding the right person to work with is super key. So doing whatever you can to meet to meet faculty members you can work with, to get on the right foot with them, to learn to to learn how to communicate with them, because effective communication with your supervisor is so important. Like laying out expectations, being in touch, feeling comfortable to tell them if you're struggling. That's really important. So that's something to think about a lot in the first couple of years. Um, and then practical stuff too, like strategizing your languages to get those done with quickly so that you're able to, dedicate maybe a little bit more time to coursework, that kind of thing. Gosh, there's a lot that goes into it. I feel like I could say more, but I've kind of been going on here. It's like the question of this first couple of years.
No, I think I mean, I remember my supervisor telling me for the first couple of years, read widely, explore, be creative. And then when it comes to the special field and the that special field paper, that's when we learn, how to kind of reduce the scope. Because I think it's the biggest challenge as you shift towards a dissertation is limiting the scope of the work, even though there are loads of other things that could be included, in some ways saying how you kind of structure thing and make it coherent. But you really can't do that until you kind of explored in a wide way. So, I mean, yeah, so I think Kara's, it's great advice to just to go wild and explore all kinds of things. You never know what you're going to find. Uh, when I came in, I wanted to do one specific thing. In later medieval stuff, I ended up working on the 13th century, and it was because of a course that I took, and it shifted my entire research. I hadn't even thought about this, until I actually sat down in this course and thought, oh my gosh, this is really cool. This is what I want to do. So you never know kind of the experience that the coursework's going to provide for you.
Yeah, and that approach, I suppose, is built into our field exam, which starts by assembling a reading list. Very large reading list with the idea that you are doing something that comes to some people naturally, didn't come to me that naturally, which is really thinking about both the field and your own contribution. What is the big conversation that you're part of, or the sort of big area of study that you're part of, and what are you able to add to it? For me, it was hard to distinguish between those two things for a while, but the field exam is partly meant to help you do that.
Actually, on the field exam, yeah, so it sounds like it's just the one, but I was wondering, is it like the traditional, here's your 50 book reading list, lock yourself in a room for 12 hours, write a paper type? Or does it take a different form?
Let's see. So
Okay.
it is a long process, but it's only one. It unfolds over the course of your third year. And it starts, so it's essentially when you make that decision in the mid part of your second year, who's your committee going to be? Then you can start talking with those new committee members. You have your first meeting with all of the committee members that spring of your second year. And at that point, you begin developing your list of books for your field exam. And it is more than 50 books. I was trying to find the exact number because I can't remember. I think it's maybe 120. It's more than 50 books. Put together with your committee. You submit that by the summer before your third year. So the summer between second and third years. And then you get reading. And you read and you read and you read. And once your committee feels that you're ready, perhaps sometime in mid to late fall of your third year, then you start writing. And what you produce is either a research paper that is sort of a proto chapter for your dissertation. So something coming out of your reading helps you understand what one of your dissertation chapters are going to be. And you write, it's not going to be a true chapter, but you write a sort of proto chapter. Or a kind of dissertation prospectus, an overview of what your dissertation is going to be. So you write one of those two things. You also, like I was saying earlier, put together a syllabus, a hypothetical syllabus for a course in your area. And that goes through, various revisions and readings. Your committee and supervisor might look at it. We actually, the executive committee at CMS, we look at it too, not to be too intense or frightening, but just a sort of an interdisciplinary readership, and a readership kind of interested in how this field exam works and helping you maximize the process. And once all the revisions are done, you turn it into your committee at the end of spring of third year. well, at the end of March. And then you schedule the oral exam with your committee, which is going off of that written work that you've done, you know, asking important questions about it, not like trying to grill you and make your life miserable, but really asking you to think about what are your key terms? What are the concepts that really matter to you? Like, are there areas that you're going to need to build your expertise? And really, ideally, trying to get to the point where by the end of that exam, you've got a plan to go forward and start your dissertation. So it's a long process, but there are not four of them. There's just one. And once you finish that process and your oral exam is over, that's when you go from being a PhD student to a PhD candidate. And you are free to go and dissertate.
This field exam sounds very scary, but I
Oh
like the
no, I didn't mean to make it
rest.
scary.
It actually is a really good conversation. The oral exam ones I've been involved in have turned out to be really oral, just conversations about how to advance the research of the thesis. It's not about finding out, we want to find out what you know, not what you don't know. And that's a huge difference in how you examine people. So yeah, so it is a little intimidating. I get that we can't get rid of all the anxiety, but really, it really is this opportunity to just kind of talk through the research and how you're going to move forward with it. So.
I mean, the oral exam and then the dissertation defense are two of the rare opportunities in one's academic life to talk about your work in a field of interested experts.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen much and it can be difficult, but it's actually also kind of special to get to do that.
You end up enjoying it.
And I mean, it's really a lot of supervision. That's very nice. It's like I feel like as a PhD student, you're never alone.
It's an important thing. It's a lonely task to begin with, and it's easy to feel very alone. But I mean, we really take our role is not to supervise, our role is to mentor. And I think it's an important difference that we really kind of try and adopt at the center.
Do a lot of students take like a year to do research abroad, or like go spend a lot of time doing research elsewhere? At least the grad students in my undergrad, often, particularly those working on medieval European history, would end up spending a year like in Europe near an archive to carry out dissertation research.
Students often do travel to do archival research. I'm Jim, you'll know more about the funding piece of it. I mean, I don't, off the top of my head, I can't think of that many students without JEPs who have recently done a full year abroad. Though, of course, there's, various fellowships you can apply to help make that happen. And once you're dissertating, if you are able, then there's nothing stopping you from going and being abroad for a year. But, we have some smaller funds to support research travel abroad for students. There's also opportunities for research travel abroad through like a lot of professors have short grants and sort of big research grants, and they'll bring on students as RAs, and that can also be a way that students will often end up getting to go abroad and do some archival work. It seems like one way or another, a lot of people manage to do it, and our students certainly have the skills to do terrific archival work. But Jim, you'll know more than I would about like the funding of how people make that happen.
Yeah, we do have an international kind of conference and research travel grant that we do that covers about $2,500, towards travel. The School of Graduate Studies also has something you can draw upon, and then there are other kind of sources that we can cobble together for you. Most of our students that I know will spend probably 3 to 6 months traveling, looking at an archive, just because the cost of living these days for both Britain and the continent can be very prohibitive. But I mean, one of the nice things now with so many repositories digitizing, you can do a lot of the grunt work up front and then spend, so that you don't need to spend less time at the archive itself because you've seen the stuff. You're just looking for the stuff that a digital facsimile is not going to show you. And so you can be more efficient with your time. Whereas, in the past, you'd have to go to the archive and pray to God you'll find something, and how many things you'll find. So that kind of makes it a little more efficient. I don't think I've seen in the last couple of years, I don't think anybody's spent more than 6 months away. And the other thing is you're teaching too. So, I mean, if there'll be a semester in which you're a TA, and that'll, then it means you only have one other semester to during the year, or you spend the summer traveling as well. So, but we strongly encourage it. Working primary sources in situ is really important.
Thanks everyone for your questions. It was so nice to meet you all.
So I was wondering if you could kind of talk a little bit more about like what kind of collaborations research-wise master students can do with their advisors. It's not like a PhD, but just kind of how that happens in a one-year program.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there are a number of different ways that master's students can be involved in research collaboration. Two of them are the sort of the master's thesis and the major research paper that I talked a little bit about in the sort of the overview section there. And those would both be opportunities for you to really be the driving force behind that research question with the supervision of a faculty member. There are occasionally opportunities for master students to also take on research assistantships. Most of the RA positions do end up going to our PhD students because the PhD is a funded degree. But there are, for example, this year there's a retired faculty member who is working to finish up a publication and needed somebody to help with citation checking. So he contacted us to see if we could put him in touch with or let students know that this research opportunity was available. So that's a really good opportunity for someone to get some experience and some research training, not on sort of their own work, but on the way that research happens and what are sort of some of the fundamentals and the nuts and bolts of what goes into developing a larger research project, or in this case, on the back end, wrapping up the loose ends of a research project. One of our MA students this year is working as a research assistant for the Dictionary of Old English. So that has been, I think, a really interesting experience for them to be kind of on the ground floor of how that project is working and to be able to see behind the scenes of how the dictionary is put together, and also to be participating in that, to doing some of the work that eventually is going to be published as part of the dictionary project.
I've taken 3 years of Latin and did better in my final year than I did in my first year. Would admissions only look at my first year or my progress in Latin as a whole?
So Riemann, the center is not so much interested in what kinds of grades you were making in your Latin classes, as it is in what kinds, what sort of experience have you had with Latin to date. So if you've taken 3 years of Latin, that certainly exceeds the requirement of 1 year of university level Latin, and would put you in good stead to be, familiarity with the grammatical structures and a lot of the vocabulary of classical Latin, and be ready to start undertaking work in medieval Latin in the level 1 Latin class. So it's not so much looking at the grades that you were earning in those courses and just whether you have that experience under your belt. Students in the CMS MA program eligible for teaching assistantships? Unfortunately not. No, the teaching assistantship positions are reserved for the PhD students. So yeah, the MA program is not a funded MA. So we do, as I said, occasionally have these research assistantships that MA students would be eligible to apply for or to participate in. But for the most part, the MA students are there as students and are in coursework and pursuing their own research goals and their own training goals. And are not eligible for those assistantships that are part of the PhD funding package. So sorry about that.
Would there be any opportunities for gaining teaching skills during your MA?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, not formal ones in the sense of, like being a TA or having a course instructorship or something like that. But yeah, I think I would need to think about that a little bit. I think there are always opportunities for for outreach work. There's a lot of kind of teaching and learning that happens among the graduate cohort as well. So again, not sort of structured forms of teaching, but students working and learning together. So yeah, I would have to think about that question a little bit. But no, I don't, not in any sort of formal established sense with the university. Yeah. Did you have something kind of in mind that you were curious about, or?
Well, it was just that I'd done a teaching assistantship before, and I really enjoyed it. And
Yeah.
and I was wondering if this program would have the same sorts of opportunities. But yeah, I enjoyed that process. And one of my long-term goals is improving my teaching skills. So I was just curious about what
Yeah. Yeah.
CMS
And
might offer.
I mean, the teaching it's an important part of, the not only professionalization, but also intellectual formation, as Kara was saying. Because you approach material in a completely different way when you have to teach it. And then there's also the surprise of what students bring to the classroom as well. So, you never actually know, as a literary scholar, I never fully know what a text means. I know what I think about it, but then as soon as someone else starts talking about it, I realize there's all kinds of stuff there that had not occurred to me yet. So teaching is very much a learning process for the instructor as well. But yeah, as I said, the master's program, we have this 1 year, and we already try to cram so much into this 1 year. So yeah, so unfortunately, teaching training is not a part of it at this point.
Kind of going off the questions about teaching experiences, are there opportunities for other professional or development, or preparation for, I mean, aside from coursework in Latin instruction, for preparing for future careers in academia, and, eventually PhD will be on the radar?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And I mean, the goal too is that the doing the MA work here at CMS would put you in a very good position to then apply for PhD programs if that's what you want to do. And some people do go on to PhDs. A lot of people do the MA and find it a really fulfilling experience, and then go off and do other things. So the professionalization course that Kara was talking about, there's no reason that MA students can't attend some of the sessions of that. It's not a course that you enroll in, or that is graded or anything like that. So if there are topics of professionalization that you're interested in learning more about, that's one way to do it. We also, would support MA students who are interested in doing conference presentations and things like that. The work in medieval studies group that John was talking about, WIMS, they meet regularly to talk about students' work in progress, and MA students are able to participate in that. I guess another example, we had an in-person open house on Tuesday afternoon, and that featured a couple of poster presentations from some of our students talking about their current research. Something like a poster presentation of a little research project that you've done, we would be able to do that as well. So there are definitely opportunities for that kind of professionalization. And then also just the range of events that are taking place on campus. CMS hosts a bi-weekly convivium. So every other Friday, we gather in the Great Hall for lunch, a lunch that is catered and paid for by the department. So free food for graduate students, always a big draw, and frankly, a big draw for faculty as well. It's a very good restaurant that they cater from. It's really nice food. And then there's a lecture, and most of the time it's a visitor to our campus, so somebody that we've brought in from another institution to share their research with us. At least twice a year, our current PhD students who are starting their dissertations, they get to present their work at the convivium. Sometimes it's members of our own faculty, our own intellectual community, who are sharing their work in progress with us. But all members of the medieval studies community at Toronto, and not just CMS, but medievalists from all over campus and from the Pontifical Institute, are welcome to come and join us for that. So that too is just kind of a great opportunity to learn about a new topic, right? Because these talks are coming from all aspects of the field. So they're very rarely about something that's in my specialty particularly, so I get to learn about 14th century economic history in Lower Germany and, Chinese travel itineraries from the 11th century. So all kinds of things that are just these fascinating aspects of medieval studies that I wouldn't have exposure to otherwise. But it's also an opportunity to get together for informal conversation with everyone who shows up for these, to ask questions of the speaker, to engage intellectually with the work that they're putting in front of us. And the graduate students are a really, really active part of that. It is not just the faculty talking to one another in the Q&A. Our students are active participants in that intellectual community. And that's just the stuff that's happening at CMS. So individual departments are sponsoring talks and bringing in visitors who work in medieval studies. The Pontifical Institute and the PIMS Library sponsor at least 3 or 4 talks a year. There are conferences happening all the time, it seems, that students are welcome to attend. So there are all kinds of those opportunities for professional and intellectual development outside of the classroom and outside of the formal training that you get as a graduate student.
Ask, would being a mature student, for example, I graduated from my BAH in 2017. Would being a mature student impact the application process at all, or is it the same for everybody?
Yeah, it's the same for everybody. Yeah. I don't know that I would call a BA from 2017 a mature student, actually, but
well, I started it in 2006. So,
oh, okay.
So yeah.
Okay.
I'm getting up there.
Yeah, no, and I mean many of our students do come into the MA straight out of undergrad, but not all of them. So we do also get students who have maybe graduated quite a while ago actually and have had careers in other fields. We have one PhD student now who was a high school history teacher for a long time, and then decided to come back and do a PhD. So yeah, the center is, like probably most graduate programs, a lot of people who are coming sort of straight through from their undergraduate careers, but not exclusively. And it certainly doesn't make a difference to the admissions process.
I'm not sure if this is the right place to ask, but like I'm from the United States of America. Is there like housing or like does the university have like a sort of specific thing for internationals who aren't, familiar with Canada's real estate and like apartments
Yeah,
and stuff?
they don't. But
Okay.
this is where something like the student executive committee and the welcoming committee are super, super helpful. So there is some graduate student housing on campus. And international students are certainly eligible to apply for it. But I mean, just across the board, U of T has way more students than it has room to house. So it's not guaranteed, but that would certainly be one option. But the prospect of moving to a new city that maybe you've never been to before, having absolutely no idea where to live, how to find an apartment. These are all things that the welcoming committee and the current PhD students and some of the master students too would be able to help offer guidance on, because they were in exactly the same position before they arrived, and they have all figured out the housing situation, and they figured out how transit works and how to make their commute. And like John was saying, they know like where is the really good place to get like the $5 lunch deal on Tuesdays and things like that. So the current graduate student cohort would be just an amazing resource to help navigate that question. Although I would definitely say apply for the graduate student housing. I mean, just numerically, you're not likely to get it because there's way more people than there are rooms. But it's worth a try. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Renee, can I add something about professional development?
Yes, absolutely, Cora. Thank you.
Before a couple years ago, Jim had some curators come in to talk to MA students specifically. And I don't know if he's doing that again this year, but I think so. So that's there's opportunities for him to start bringing in. We were going to do something also with the Toronto, like the publishing, because there are so many professional development opportunities for PhD students. We started to bring some people from U of T that are going on to doing curation and like heritage studies and publishing as well.
I think that that's great. And I think too that it's worth emphasizing that there are a lot of career paths that you can follow, even just with an MA, you know. So I think the MA is a really great opportunity to explore what graduate school is like, because graduate school is really different from undergrad. And if you've done a master's in another field, then you sort of have had that experience already. But you're really leveling up. It's a different kind of intellectual commitment, and it asks you to do different kinds of work. And a master's is a good way to sort of try that out without making a 5 or 6 year commitment of your life to it, and see if it's something that you really want to do. And if you do, then the master's has put you in a much better position than you would have been coming straight out of your BA to apply for a PhD program. And if you don't, then you have had this really important intellectual experience for a year, and you have been part of a really warm and friendly cohort of students. The MA cohort just bonds like you wouldn't believe. It is such a tight-knit group. It's amazing how close they get in that year, while still being part of the larger student cohort with the PhD students as well. So I think the MA is a great way to kind of dip your toe into graduate study and see if you like how the water feels before committing to a PhD, and then can also prepare you for some of these careers, like in curation, in museum and heritage work, in publishing, where a master's degree kind of opens up a different level of potential career opportunities than you would have with just a bachelor's degree. So.
Are the collaborative programs listed on the CMS website the only ones available? I'm interested in the use of digital humanities or information sciences as methods of preserving, studying, and teaching medieval history.
The collaborative programs listed on the CMS website are the only ones that CMS is affiliated with. And the thing about the collaborative programs is, again, the master's is only 6 courses. It's only 1 year. So master's students aren't really able to participate in those CSs. But that doesn't mean that they can't take some of the courses that are listed in the collaborative specializations. And certainly, right, the digital humanities stuff. I mean, one of our CMS faculty, Alexandra Bolantinianu, is affiliated with the DH program at Woodsworth College, and she teaches at least 1 course for CMS every year. So DH and information science are definitely areas where our students are doing coursework, even at the MA level. And so even if it's not possible to do the collaborative specialization per se, it is still possible to take advantage of the coursework that's offered through it, in many cases as part of your MA course load.
Would it be possible to take a class with the CMS even if we are to be coming from a different department, for example, the English department?
Oh, okay. So if you're thinking about applying to different departments as well, yes, the answer to that is absolutely yes. You can absolutely take a class with CMS even if you're in a different department. So my CMS seminar last winter had 2 students from the English department in it. So yeah, if you're in a master's program in a different department, those CMS courses are open to you as well. I guess the only restrictions would be just making sure that your home department will count those courses as part of your degree. Mostly they do. Mostly any course that is kind of related to the field that you're pursuing a degree in, departments will usually accept those classes towards your degree. So yeah, absolutely.